Welcome. On behalf of the San Antonio Family Association, the Christian Chamber of Commerce of San Antonio, and the Knights of Columbus Council 7613, we welcome you to this property tax appraisal protest seminar, an educational seminar to help you learn how to best position yourself to fight for your rights on your property valuation. So before we get started, a little housekeeping. Does anybody need a pen? If you have somebody we'll pass them around. If you might need a pen, just if you would return them when you get through, it would be great. But my name is Patrick Von Dillon on behalf of the San Antonio Family Association. I'm glad that each of you are here. Whether you register or not, we're going to pass around a sign-up sheet that the slides that Mr. Berlongo will go through, we will email to you if you put your information down there. Name, email address, mobile phone number would be best, and we'll pass that around here in just a minute. We just put forward a little sheet. Everybody get a one-page sheet, and I would like you. I need a pair of glasses. If you would grab that real quick. As we do with everything we do at the San Antonio Family Association, we begin in prayer. So if you would, you can, I know some of you will enjoy that, some of you might, but if you would bear with us and as we begin our meeting. And I want to read to you right before we do that there's a note there I'll come back to right after prayer on private property we'll talk about here in just a second. But if you would join with me in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. We sit before you, Holy Spirit, conscious of our sinfulness, but aware that we gather in your name. Come to us, remain with us, and enlighten our hearts. Give us light and strength to know your will, to make it our own and to live it in our lives. Guide us by your wisdom. Support us by your power, for you are God, sharing the glory of Father and Son. You desire justice for all. Enable us to uphold the rights of others. Do not allow us to be misled by ignorance or corrupted by fear or favor. Unite us to yourself in the bond of love, and keep us faithful to all that is true. As we gather in your name, may we temper justice with love, so that all our decisions may be pleasing to you, and earn the reward promised to good and faithful servants. We ask this of you who live and reign with the Father and the Son, one God, forever and ever. Amen. If you would join me, put our flags over here. And patriotism is a virtue, and the fourth is also the fourth tenet of the Knights of Columbus is patriotism, and we want to honor their building and our lives and our country as we go forward. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
At the bottom of your page there, you'll find the Texas Pledge. You can grab it real quick. And right at the very bottom, honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible. Thank you very much. While you're taking your seat, I want to read to you real quick what it says about private property. This is actually a teaching of through the Catechism of the Catholic Church in paragraph 2431, talking about private property. This is really interesting as we were preparing these seminars that this would come up. And as you know, in the Declaration of Independence, Thomas Jefferson, when he wrote about the unalienable rights, the right to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, it was changed. It was originally the right to property. And he got his, Thomas Jefferson come up with that on his own. There was actually a saint named St. Robert Bellarmine, and who was canonized after his life, and he actually wrote about the unalienable rights and about property. And there's quite a great story about him. His name is Robert Bellarmine, and his feast day is September 17th, but where Thomas Jefferson got a lot of his thinking and philosophy from. So if you would, the responsibility of the state, economic activity, especially the activity of a market economy, cannot be conducted in an institutional, juridical, or political vacuum. On the contrary, it presupposes sure guarantees of individual freedom and private property, as well as a stable currency and efficient public services. Help me out there. Hence, the principal task of the state is to guarantee that security. Another task of the state is that of overseeing and directing the exercise of human rights in the economic sector. However, primary responsibility in this area belongs not to the state, but to individuals and to various groups and associations which make up society. Hence, the San Antonio Family Association having this seminar for you tonight is an association to help individuals, you, to protect your rights. So thank you all for being here. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce Mr. Michael Berlanga, CPA, and who is an expert in dealing with the Bexar County Appraisal District. And welcome him. He's also the president of the San Antonio Christian Chamber of Commerce. And so we hope you enjoy it. Hope to hear some great responses. And thank you very much for being here. Michael.
Thank you. Well, I hope it's just as loud when we're finished, but a little bit about myself. I'm born and raised San Antonian. So for those of you who are imported from other states, God bless you, came to the highest burden non-income tax state in the country. But other than that, everything else is also bigger. And what we're going to do tonight is going to be really, hopefully, empowering and dynamic. I like to tell you, I am a CPA. As you can tell from my blue jeans, my boots, I'm a cow parking attendant. Because if you own a ranch and you park cows, you pay less property taxes than you do in the city. But actually, I am studied in tax. I've got a master's degree in tax. And I tell people I'm a tax and real estate consultant. I'm probably the only real estate broker you'll ever meet that wants your property value to go up and just doesn't want you to get taxed every step along the way. So if I'm not bipolar, but I will talk about your value being the lowest to the government, and I still respect the opportunity that maybe when you go to market, you're going to get the highest value possible. As I said before, I'm a CPA, so I've had a master's degree in tax since I was 22 years old. You say, well, 22, did you get the math wrong? No. When I was 14, I was blessed to be in a seminary and a workshop. And I thought, well, maybe I have a calling. Well, when I came out of that workshop, my father died suddenly of a stroke. And so that was it. You know, from one moment to the other, we're visiting like all of us are today, and he was gone. Life-changing. So I made a deal with God. I said, if you want me to be a priest, you wouldn't let me get a scholarship to Central Catholic. But lo and behold, God has a sense of humor. I got a scholarship to Central Catholic. And I said, okay, well, you know, I don't want to lose Mom. You know, we've got 7 of us. I'm going to get out of school as fast as I can. I went to school year-round for 3 years, finished at the top of my class. Obviously, it was a class of dummies. But they gave me a full scholarship to St. Mary's, and I finished that in 3 years. So at the age of 20, I realized I got a degree in accounting, working for Arthur Andersen, the biggest public accounting firm in the world, and Mom's still alive. Thank the Lord, right? So I'm going to go on for 2 more years, go to UTSA, get a master's in tax. So I'm 59. And over that time, you know, I've represented people in front of the government with a master's in income tax. So the distinction is that I already know how to battle income tax. I always like to say, before we get started, you know, Patrick has his prayer. My simplistic inspiration is my favorite scripture. It says, give to Caesar what is Caesar's, and give to God what is God's. Caesar's dead. They didn't amend the Bible. It doesn't include the Bexar Appraisal District. Okay? So if you feel empowered in the scriptural sense, we're going to talk about some other authority. So I'm the son of a Mexican immigrant. I know I'm the fairest-skinned son of a Mexican immigrant. That's the truth. You know, but my grandfather was killed in the Mexican Revolution. Grandmother came over, brought him over as an infant. My mother flunked the 1st grade because she couldn't speak English. And I was blessed to be raised to speak English. I also learned a couple other languages called tax and real estate. So I'm not bilingual. I am bicultural. I know how to take off the shuck before I eat the tamale. But I do speak these 3 languages. I'm also an Acts brother, for those of you that are familiar with the Acts retreats. God bless you. If you want to get away with the Holy Spirit and turn off all that digital, go on an Acts retreat. And I'm going to talk about Rotarians, where you won't find one with Bexar Appraisal District. As he said before, well, we gave you a pen, relax. You don't have to take copious notes. This is not a multi-level marketing scheme. We've got nothing to sell. We're not out here trying to get clients. So we're doing this because we believe that there's a passion for helping people and helping families. And we're going to talk about how this is relevant to what you're going to learn tonight. About 4 years ago, I ran for property tax assessor collector. And somebody called and said, you know, why do I care? This is a real estate developer. Why should I care who the property tax collector is? And I thought, that's a good question. Why should he care? I mean, I run against former Senator Carlos Uresti, and I guess they must have thought I liked the family because I took on Albert. But the reality was, I had just turned 56, and I realized I'd outlived my father. And I was so blessed, to think that in spite of all the stresses of life, that I was in pretty good health. And that was a big milestone for me. And then I realized at the same time, my mother was 96. And God bless her soul, she died last year at the age of 99. And so, I lost there. And so what happened in that moment was I realized it's my birthday, I've turned 56, I outlived my father, but I've got 40 more years of this nonsense. Because she's given me that legacy. So I said, I've got to do something about it. I'll use this platform to be a spokesperson. I got more votes than Trump, and I still didn't get elected. So I agree with Hillary. There may have been some ballot fraud. I don't know who we were colluding with, but I didn't get elected. And I did learn along the way, though, that the Bear Appraisal District Board of Directors included a certain tax collector, along with a county commissioner, along with a city councilman, along with some other people who represent school districts. I don't see anybody in here who could have been elected to that unless you'd been elected to represent a government who then sits on a board and talks about a budget and then hires a chief appraiser. So we'll come back to the structure of why we feel like we're shadow boxing with what we're about to talk about tonight. But the role of the tax collector, the Bear Appraisal District is to hire the chief appraiser and set the budget. So what I say is they call this a local property tax system that follows the principle of checks and balances. I say they have advanced the system of limited responsibility. Everybody blames somebody else, right? The locals blame the state blames the school districts, and we go round and round until we find that we have an unsustainable tax burden. But let's go back to some other empowerment. If you didn't feel empowered by the scripture, maybe you'll be empowered by what we're doing tonight. Because under the First Amendment, Congress said they would make no law respecting an establishment of religion. So whether you're Catholic or not, the good news is, they can't prohibit our free exercise of any religion, notwithstanding what happened with Chick-fil-A and what may happen in this city. They can't abridge our freedom of speech, even though I haven't had a governmental entity yet offer the opportunity for me to give the same presentation in a school district, same presentation even in associations who are tied to the government. So we also have the opportunity to assemble, and we're doing it peaceably, and we're going to learn how to petition the government for redress of our grievances. So there's your constitutional authority. I love this gentleman. His name is Judge Learned Hand. He was a Supreme Court Justice. So if you want some guidance from somebody wiser than I, his opinion when they're talking about the difference between tax avoidance and tax evasion was that there wasn't even a patriotic duty to increase one's taxes, and that nobody owes any public duty to more than the law demands. So now you've got scriptural authority, you've got constitutional authority, you've got a Supreme Court Justice's wisdom, and now we get down to Texas. The Texas Taxpayer Bill of Rights. This is what I've learned because I was inspired to become knowledgeable. I run for tax collector. My goodness, what does that have to do with, helping you lower what I would have to collect? And I found this, and I thought, wow, look at these rights that we have. As Texans, we have the right to fair and equitable treatment, to understanding the taxes we pay, to contesting the decision, to knowing how government spends our dollars. So where do you see the obstacle? I don't see it yet. And what's the motivation to stop the tax abuse that you currently feel burdened by? Well, I'll tell you what it is. I believe, and conservative think tanks will support this, that the tax system is outdated. We're no longer a state of agriculture and big landowners. It's not the basis from which our wealth should be taxed in order to fund those public services. The process is chaotic, otherwise you wouldn't be here, right? You figure it out on your own. You don't need me to tell you, but maybe I can help. The school funding system discriminates. It's been proven in the Supreme Court, which said in 1968 that in Rodriguez versus SAISD, we made history. We said, we asked the Supreme Court, is this a wealth discriminatory school finance system? Supreme Court said yes, however, we cannot protect your right to an education under the 14th Amendment. So they kicked it back to the states. But the states' public constitution says they're supposed to fund public education efficiently. I will maintain it is not efficient, and we'll talk a little bit about that. So let's get down to the process. January 1st is the effective date. Now, does everybody understand what that means? By way of example, in the Dominion, where there was a hailstorm, that doesn't help you establish what your value was January 1st. And you say, well, that's bad news for the Dominion. But it's good news for all of us that January 1st, unless you invited the Bear Appraisal District into your home, they don't know what the condition of your home was. You see, we've already started. There's already ambiguity. There's already a separation of knowledge. January 1st is the effective date. If there's deferred maintenance as of January 1st, if you've improved something since January 1st, well, you have probably a record of what you spent to improve on something that made your home deficient. So it's very important to understand January 1st is the effective date, even though today you could still go out and take pictures and document the condition of your home. The appraisal district appraises properties according to value as of April 1st, and that's when you start getting your notices, early April. The deadline to protest was May 15th. There are some exceptions. We'll speak to those only on a one-on-one basis, because hopefully most of you either filed your protest or you're getting ready to file next year. It's a great way to vote. Vote with your protest. We're setting records in Bear County, and we need to continue to do that. The protests are beginning with informal hearings. Those are courtesy hearings. Now, what I mean by that is they're not required by law to let you go one-on-one with any of the appraisers. And so they'll send you a schedule and they'll say your informal hearing is, by way of example, June 4th. And your formal hearing is 7 days later. Now, if you can't make that date, trust me, as a taxpayer, they will be sympathetic to rescheduling it. As a representative, I tell people, don't put my name on your application until you get the date that allows us to work together to get that date and to be prepared to make our case. Because they won't reschedule, generally speaking, for any professional, whoever you hire. But it's important to note that it is a courtesy hearing. So if you miss the courtesy hearing, for any reason, don't give up. Go back the next day. They'll see you. They're not so bound by that date that they're discourteous. And I know the chief appraiser, I've been blessed to work with clients to sue him, so I know what I'm talking about. You can show up on the informal date, you can show up the next day, and we're going to talk about what can happen even before you get to the formal hearing. And that'll continue maybe even past August, depending on your circumstances. The collection phase again begins on October 1st, and we'll go round the cycle again. So this isn't going away. I have no anticipation, no hope, and I'm full of hope, but no hope that the Texas legislature, of which I was blessed to work in 6, 7 years ago, that they're going to come up with a system that's going to relieve us and reform the system in time for next year. So take note, tell all your friends and family, be here next year and file your protest before the filing deadline next year. We're in this together, and it's going to take a moment and a momentum and a movement to really bring about change. Let's talk about market value, because there's a real confusion. Most of us think of the value of our home as the value, our best value, our real estate value, what they sold the home down the street for. I will tell you that my car is not ready to be traded in. Has anybody brought a car today, with the exception of Patrick, because he gets the kids to wash his cars? Is anybody's car ready to go from here to the dealer? Show of hands. Nobody's ever done this. So I'm waiting for that first one. Some car dealer to drive in and say, mine's ready to go to the dealer. If your car's not ready to go to the dealer because you need to clean it up, tune it up, maybe even fix up, then why is your house presumed to be ready? Why would you hire a realtor at the general market rate of 6%? Why would you need a title company to prove that you have the right of ownership at 1%? Why would you overlook the fact that deferred maintenance, for simple math, might be 3%? So I start out with, if you're telling me the home down the street sold for $200,000, then my home must be worth $180,000, 10% less. Because you're comparing it to homes that have had all this wisdom brought to bear on it, all this enhancement brought to bear on it. But it gets worse. Because once we start talking about what's going on inside the home, the deferred maintenance, the honeydews that they haven't seen, they're gonna tell you your land value went up. And we're gonna go through a case study of people just like yourself, where we proved them wrong because we showed them that the burden of proof is on the BAD, and that's not an acronym. It really is a bad situation when you feel like you're submitting your claim to a health insurance company and you've got cancer and the surgeon's waiting to do the surgery and they reject the claim. What do you have to do? You resubmit. And then the second time they go, oh, you really do have cancer. Okay, well now we'll honor the claim. It's the same thing with the system. At least that's how I feel culturally. So what's the logic? What's the logic behind what I could look for? If you want to put your favorite realtor to work, call them and say, you know, if you were listing my home, what would you tell me I need to do to get the highest value? And I'll bet you they will give you all sorts of ideas. In fact, they'll give you so many ideas that you want to take note. Because from landscaping to foundation, from elevation to roofing, from exterior to interior painting, if you take pictures, you're going to make a more powerful presentation to that appraiser. If you've got estimates, again, a more powerful presentation, because they don't know what the interior of your home looks like. They don't know the quality of your windows. They don't know that your kitchen appliances perhaps haven't been upgraded, or the kitchen layout is dated, or is functionally obsolescent, as in some cases. Because you couldn't even get some of the newer appliances into the older floor plans. How about the latest in home audio? Now, I'm not telling you that the solar energy is efficient, but I'm sure you've gotten a call every once in a while where they said, you need to have solar energy. Well, what happens if your home doesn't have solar energy? What happens if your home doesn't have the latest and greatest windows? You know, I would say to you, there's your argument when you're comparing to some of these homes. They have some of these things that you didn't find in your home 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago. But I'll stop talking about common sense. I will let the authorities speak for themselves. This is the property owner evidence guide according to the Bear Appraisal District. And it says that these are only suggestions and that no evidence need be presented. I laughed when I read this, right? Culturally speaking, they're just suggesting you might want to do what? Bring no evidence, or if you bring some evidence, now they get common sense on us. Bring photographs of property. Bring photographs of the internal and external property damage. Bring photographs of adverse external factors. You get the picture, pardon the pun? Because they're getting tired of listening to the facts, and they need to be entertained with some images. And I agree with them, because they went on for the fourth time to say photographs, and then they said, but only 10 pictures. Well, I will tell you, I don't see this as the 10th commandment. I see it more as the Bill of Rights. So I would encourage you to go in there with 10 pages, and in each page, cut it in 4, and have 4 pictures, and go in there with 40 pictures, and let them tell you why they don't want to look at it. Because most of you are very likable people, at least at first impression, with the exception of my buddy here, Mike Knuffy. He's tough. You see, he's got a tie. Yeah, he's just a tough-looking guy. He's looking for a fight. But the rest of us, we're well received as, you know, amiable, not very informed, and we want to gain the sympathy of those people by saying, look, I brought some pictures. Could you look at these? And maybe they'll start looking at them. Because some of these people actually are not good heart donors. What do I mean by that? Some of them actually have a heart. And you've got to consider that possibility. With God, all things are possible. But what happens as we find when the storm subsides and all was calm? Some of you may have incurred damage. You may have filed an insurance claim. And that insurance company may have a report. And that report may have outlined more damage than what the check covered. More damage than what you could afford. So there's another source. If you don't want somebody coming to your house and giving you grief with a bid for whatever it is that you would use to find that your home is deficient. Plenty of people will tell you your home is deficient. For a change, welcome them. And then say, thank you, I'll get back with you. Please don't call me 3 times for me to tell you no 3 times. I really just need an estimate to help me with my property tax protest. But if you help me, maybe if I want to get to that before I sell, you'll be at the top of the list. So Acts of God can be blessings in disguise. And don't overlook the possibility that your insurance claim that you couldn't make or didn't make because you thought it didn't cover your, wasn't going to get enough money to cover your deductible, could still be a source of information. So we continue through this property tax owner evidence guide. And for those of you that recently bought a home, where they talk about the closing statement, that was when you bought it. Unless you bought it on December 31st, again, you might have made a mistake. You might have overpurchased. You might have overlooked the seller's disclosure that didn't maybe articulate to some of the conditions that now you find you have to attend to. Oh, let me go back. Square footage. Some of you have roof lines that include space that isn't climate controlled. The Bear Appraisal District may not know it, and unless they violated by trespass on your property, they may not know that the square footage of the climate controlled area is not equivalent to the roof. And so sometimes they're looking at the roof, or sometimes they're looking at a shed out back that you have for your dog, and they want to assume that it's a climate controlled, dog house for the spouse. I mean, it's not always what they know, it's what they don't know that we have to impress upon them. I've seen mistakes even between appraisals that we got by our lender versus the actual square footage that we discovered later by remeasuring the actual square footage. If you want comparative sales information, most of you, I wish I'd met before May 15th. All you had to do was ask for the evidence guide, but you still can. If you flipped over that form and you put, my appraisal's wrong, and signed your name, and checked the lower right-hand box where it said evidence requested, that's all you had to do. Let me tell you why it's so important that you ask for that evidence. These are words of Mike Amasquita. He's taught me a lot about how to help him not do his job. As he told me, don't help me do my job. Ask for the evidence guide. Why? Because once they put on the evidence, they can't put on more evidence. And this is real important as we go through the appeals process. So the evidence guide will allow them to say, this is what we're coming up with for values. This is what we're comparing it to. And with that, you know where they're making their first case. So you can still ask for it. You can still have it sent to you even if you didn't do it on the application. But for those of you that volunteered a little more information, next year don't do it. What's the first rule of negotiation? Don't make the first offer. So that's okay if some of you volunteered and said, this is all I want. But I will tell you, like a good golf coach, do not become attached to the outcome. Let's commit to the process, and we'll have the best round of our life. But these are my commandments, based on personal experience, sitting next to people like yourself, or coaching through people like yourself, not for hire, but for help and for insight, because I wanted to understand just how chaotic it was. It was a lot easier if I didn't have any compensation for the opportunity, because I could go down there and relax and laugh and keep the peace, and then realize, what's going on here? I don't shoot the messenger. These people, pardon the expression, bad staff and panels are seasonally overworked. They do not have financial incentive for outcomes. I represent people in front of the IRS, and they don't have incentive for outcomes. And when I say I represent them, I'll help either one. I'll help the IRS employee with his property tax protest, and I'll help the property tax people, or appraisers, with their IRS issues. So I get to know these people in a very unique way because I cross over in my expertise. But I can tell you that you're more likely to gain a relationship in the short time you're in front of them if you don't assume that it's a fight and it's an argument and you're going to be condescending and you're going to be more informed, and you'll see me just as casually dressed if you ever see me down there as today, then as you will today. I always tell you, second commandment, be humble, not proud of your home. Why? Because your home is in your heart, but be humble about the house. Okay? So we got to change. We got to be counterintuitive. We got to change our cultural way of thinking. I mean, I love my family and I love the home we grew up in. But if I'm in front of the appraisal district, it's a house. And it's a house that shouldn't be valued so high. A picture is worth 1,000 words. I showed you 5 times where they told you to bring pictures. And the biggest takeaway for any of you in the messaging business is that you want to do this. Watch. You want to inform with facts, right, of the brain. You want to entertain with images. and you want to inspire from the heart. So that's your takeaway, whether it's about property taxes or about anything that you want to convey to the largest audience of listeners, the opportunity for them to accept your message. So we want to entertain with images, bring pictures.
Mike,
Yes, sir.
what if you had more pictures than 10 pictures?
Well, as I said before, if you're sympathetic, if they're sympathetic to you, they generally won't, don't show up with 40 pictures, show up with 10 pages with 4 pictures per page. And then you can always back up and say, well, then ignore that one. If I only get to pick 10, pick your top 10. But go in there with 40. More than likely in the informal hearing where they're not running you through there like McDonald's, and you're sitting there across the table, one-to-one, they're very friendly at that level. It's when they have to go in front of the formal panel that they feel like they're in front of a jury. And they kind of get their collar a little stiff, like my dry clean collar here. But the informal hearing is your best opportunity, not necessarily to get the best value, but to get the best information from them and to them. Let's talk about location. Location, 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 right? That's the fundamental of good real estate. Well, it's also the fundamental of bad real estate, or real estate values that should be challenged. Why? Because you live next to commercial traffic, aka the Friendly Spot. Has anybody been to that bar downstairs? Okay. Well, I wasn't trying to put you on the spot, but if you live next to the Friendly Spot, it's like maybe living next to this church. If you don't like the crowd, you don't want to be living next to the church when they have their festival, right? You don't like the noise. You can turn that, what to you is a convenience, into the argument that, wait a minute, I mean, those kids, they play baseball out there, the lights are on to all hours, at the Friendly Spot, you can't go to sleep before midnight. I don't care how expensive the bed and breakfast is. It's a great place to go watch a Spurs game, but it's not a good place to live next to. How about a main thoroughfare exposure? I grew up at the corner of Rosewood and Belknap, right near Monte Vista, and all the 18 to 22-year-olds that were going to San Antonio College would turn off Hildebrand to avoid San Pedro, avoid McCullough, and they would race up and down Belknap. Now the good news while living on that corner was that we had Belknap and Rosewood as an extended field when we played baseball. If you could hit it over the street, you got a home run. And the good news is we didn't get run over as kids. But the good news, if I was in that home, I'd argue that it's not safe for my kids to be in those streets. And therefore, being on that corner lot is not an advantage. It's actually a safety risk. How about a green belt, or is it a drainage ditch? Anybody got a mosquito farm nearby? Right? That's what we call them. Now, for some of you who maybe even volunteer to mow that green belt, I appreciate the extra land. But I wouldn't present it that way. How about being under a flight pattern? Are you affected by the airplanes that fly over if you're in Churchill Estates? Patrick's favorite, do you have a registered sex offender in the neighborhood? Because we now know, because of the digital access to information, we can make the argument that, wait a minute, this is a dangerous neighborhood. I'm not saying go knock on the door and give them some grief. I'm just saying use the rap sheet for your property. Is there a high crime incident happening in the area in general? Are we seeing a trend? Just throw the book at these people, because they might, one of those things might just be the same issue that that appraiser has on their own home. Remember, they're paying property taxes too.
Excuse me, Mark.
Yes, ma'am.
Would you include things like multiple group homes in the neighborhood also?
I throw that at them too. And you can come up with more, and send me an email so I can add that to the slide. Yes, ma'am.
Maybe close to a quarry and we hear all the noise.
Oh, absolutely. In fact,
How do we present that?
why don't I will take audio, record it.
Okay.
Record it and go in there and just play 15 seconds. Here, I just want you to hear what this sounds like. Yes, sir.
How about if you could hear Ken Fuller's?
What's that?
What if you could hear Ken?
Again, I would show it with the Google map. You know, God's view says, look, see where I am? See where this is?
And you hear it.
But if, you know, learn sight and sound. It's another way to get the message across. Those are all excellent ideas. Please send them. You can pick up my card on the way out. Send the ideas. You're helping me help other people. So we want to continue to enhance this presentation.
Mike,
And yes, sir.
what were those ideas? We couldn't hear them back here.
Those ideas were being next to a commercial, you know,
Quarry.
oh, the quarry, I'm sorry, the quarry and Camp Bullis
Group homes.
and group homes. Go ahead.
Just
rental properties?
Well, again, if rental properties are becoming more, and it's hard to identify, you know, you don't know just because, like if I rent my home and I'm still on title and I've moved out, you could suggest it, but you may not know
What
it.
if you know your neighborhood and you know?
Then say it. Then I'd take a map out and I'd mark them.
Okay.
I'm one of the last few homeowners and I'm living in a transient neighborhood and take pictures of the conditions of their yards because they may not be taking care of those homes the way we would as homeowners. Fair enough? I mean, here's an example of one. By way of example, I own this home, and this is Oak Hills Country Club. And so I've got this nice view of the 15th, the 16th, 15th green, 16th tee box. They even moved a driving range back here. This home's value, theoretically, shouldn't be the same as this home, even though we're on the same street. Look at what these homes look at. Look at what these homes look at. They're looking at an alley in somebody else's backyard. It's a great neighborhood. Another aspect, I wish I could pull back up the view, is there's only 2 streets in and out of this, and it's not a gated neighborhood. Quickly, somebody could get in, break in, and through next door, we're constantly talking through next door about, oh, did you see that suspicious looking person, suspicious looking vehicle, suspicious looking this, that, or the other. And the crime report will reflect that they know they can get in, break in, get out, get on Callahan and get back to I-10 or 410 so fast that we know what the police response is, right? So they know too. So let's keep on. We're only up to 4 commandments. The 5th one, we're going to talk about a case study about arguing the lack of vacant lot sales. You got your notice and it said the value of the land and the value of the structure, rather not in that order. Value of the structure, value of the land, I'm not sure which comes first. Year to year. Some of you, your land went up in value. At least that's what they would say. We're going to argue that they do not have a comparable for a vacant lot. Unless, like my brother who's president of Millen Homes, you bought a new home and there's still lots of which he's not even selling. How do they know what the value of a vacant lot is? Did a tornado come in that we didn't see and wipe out one and then they resold it? You don't find that generally in most of our cases. When we get to the formal panel, should we not get what we want at the informal hearing? We're going to go in front of 3 people, a jury of our peers theoretically. And unfortunately, while you would think you have more time, their goal is to get you in and out there in 15 minutes and also to allow you to be intimidated by the formality of the fact that it's all being recorded. Literally, you will walk in, they will ask you to raise your hand, tell the truth, they'll say the same thing to the appraiser, they'll hit a button, and they're going to go through this protocol. They're going to say, Mr. Appraiser, he makes his case, you make your case, he makes responses, you make responses, click, game over, thanks for playing. And we'll give you your value today, but you don't have to accept it because you're going to have 45 days to decide if you want to go to arbitration. We'll talk about arbitration. So, but you've got 3 people on the other side. Now, I told you about my background. Fair-skinned, son of a Mexican immigrant. So, I do appreciate that some people have cultural biases. And sometimes their biases are in favor of us. Some people, just like you. Consider the possibility that maybe the woman across in that panel is connecting with your spouse. If your spouse is out there representing you because you think she's more likable. Maybe that you're connecting, maybe you're not connecting. I've seen some very educated women, and I've seen some arrogant men on the other side of the table who couldn't handle the fact that she made a great case, and you could tell they weren't even listening. They had made their conclusion almost before she had even made her case. And we're going to talk about how not to get offended, even though you didn't get the result perhaps at that point that you wanted. But if you could connect with your panel, the panel's getting tired. There's 3 of them. There's high thinkers and low thinkers, high feelers and low feelers. You represent, each of you individually, like I do, 25% of the English-speaking population in your style. That is to say, some of us are thinkers, and we like to talk facts. Some of us are, let's just say, feelers, and we like to talk about our emotions. So, 75% chance those 3 people on the other side are not of your social style. So what does that mean? We're going to come back to the biggest takeaway tonight. Inform with facts. entertain with images, and inspire with sympathy and empathy.
Michael,
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
quick, there's actually 4 people. Because there's the 3
Plus the appraiser.
plus the appraisal, which can be on.
That's right. But that's our opponent, if you will. I'm talking about the panel is who's going to vote to set a value. The appraiser's going to make a recommendation. You can make a recommendation, and then they are going to make their own
But the
vote.
appraisal argues with you.
Yeah, They don't need to argue. They're just going to make their case, and yes, they will oppose you. But that's why I'm emphasizing that I realize this person is making the case in their appraisal district. He's the appraiser. I'm the taxpayer. It's those 3 people that I'm getting connect with. Okay? This person is going to just be presenting facts. We've got to present facts, images, and inspiration. We come back to your home's not on the market. Please, I read it in bold letters. Your home is not on the market. Every one of you should walk in and say, my home's not on the market. How are you comparing me to homes for sale? My home's not market ready. I haven't talked to any real estate brokers about all the things that I would do to compare that home down the street that got sold by XYZ Realty Company that says we can get you the highest value. But the last 2 commandments, and they're scripturally inspired, right? Go to Catholic services, and what are we told? Peace be with you. And also with you. And also with the Bureau Appraisal District. Because arbitration is an option to litigation. And this is not explained enough times. It's not even explained when they tell you, if you don't like our value, you've got 45 days to appeal to an arbitration process that is cheaper than litigation. So we'll talk about that, okay? I'll go through the fee schedule with you.
So as I read that, it appears that you have to sign up to agree to arbitration, and that precludes you from any litigation.
Yes, but you've got 45 days to consider the options, and I've gone both directions. And for many in this room, which is generally the case, the savings, depending on the cost of litigation, isn't justified litigation, and I'm having to fill in the gap for the majority of people who didn't even know that they had 45 days. So we got contrary with each other at the informal.
Sure.
We went in front of the panel. They came up with a number closer to his than mine, but that's still not what I was hoping for.
Sure.
And they said, the hearing's over. And you're like, but. What happened? Well, I walk out of there and I'm saying, okay, calm down, say a prayer, gain my peace. I got 45 days from when they send me the result to say I'm going to file for binding arbitration.
Right. But I thought as I read that, if you want to go before this panel, that you have to agree to arbitration and no litigation.
No, that's not correct. That's not my experience.
Okay.
And I've been on both sides of litigation and arbitration. I hope they haven't changed the rules since last year, but not that I know. So again, keep your peace. For those of you that are not golfers, the best advice you give to a golfer, do not become attached to the outcome. Do not go out there and say, I'm going to shoot my record low. Just go play one shot at a time. Okay? We're going to go through this one step at a time. So you commit to the process of presentation, appeals, with knowledge that you can go to arbitration. Here's the case study about land. We talked about land. This is Castle Hills, South Castle Hills, just inside Loop 410. Someone no different than anybody in this room, no coat and tie, homemaker. She says, Mike, I don't understand, you may not be able to read it, I'll read it for you. The value was based on a prior year of $150,000 to the improvements, $34,000 to the land, and for a total of $185,000. They increased her improvements by 10%. Just the improvements, right? The structure by $15,000. They increased the land by 68% to a total of $224,000. I told her, she's a friend of mine, I said, listen, go on down there and I will be glad to, go down and see if I can give some help. I'm running late, believe it or not, and she says, oh, don't worry about it, we're getting along, we're bonding. This is what she got after the informal hearing. She was told $213,000. And she was enjoying they're 2 women, they're getting along, we're visiting with, and she says, Mike, that doesn't even help me.
You know, because my tax value is still going up more than, 10%. So I've got no tax break. And all I've done is argue for next year that the value wasn't 224 down to 213. What do? I said, well, tell them, can they show you a lot that's vacant? Can they show, I don't remember any homes being destroyed by tornadoes. She said, okay, I'll go back. And after the formal hearing where she made that argument, because remember, the burden of proof was on the Beryl Appraisal District, they knocked it down to 190. I wasn't there. I'm not taking credit for being there, so it wasn't my presence. So you can do this. Do not, so look at the details. Did your land go up in value? Ask them, where's the vacant lot sales? Because they have no evidence to justify that, but they're going to do it because I believe the system is geared towards getting around everything we talked about, right? They didn't get into your house, so they're just going to say things like, well, land's going up everywhere. Well, you got to prove it.
Hey, Mike?
Yes, sir.
What happens if that happened several years ago and their appraisal, like in your case, if that had stayed at 224 and gone up to 230 and now to 235 based on land value?
I'd still go back and say, just because I missed it doesn't mean I agreed with it. Silence is an affirmation. It's just, and if you want to gain somebody's appreciation for your humility, tell them you're ignorant. You're not stupid. You're just ignorant. I'm ignorant. I don't know a lot of things. I didn't know how to protest. I didn't protest. I'm ignorant. You know? So I didn't protest for the last 3 years. So yes, that's a very good point. Go to the BCAT website and you can get 5 years of history. And say, I didn't protest in 16, I didn't protest in 17, but I should have, but it's wrong, and every year stands on its own. You can't have it both ways. It doesn't stand on its own only when it favors the government. You see? So every year stands on its own. Yes, sir.
I was going to ask a similar question. My appraisal went down this year, but it's been trending up over 5 or 6 years. So I should still go protest.
If you feel like you can work with this information and this advice to make the case, the fact that they gave you, we Hispanics like a balloon, you know, here's a little appetizer, then I say, tell them, thank you, but that's not enough. You've been already getting to me. The IRS, let me compare it by contrast. The IRS has a statute of limitations. If you ever get audited, they can go back 3 years. You can go back and amend your return for 3 years. If you made a mistake and overlooked your charitable contributions to the church and you missed it, you can go back 3 years. Doesn't work with property taxes. Every year stands on its own. Yes, ma'am.
In my neighborhood, it seems like everybody's structures went down a couple of $1,000s, but the land went up like $10,000 to $15,000 on almost all my neighbors. How do we fight that?
Well, this is exactly what we said. It's cultural that they're using that because they know that we're getting more sophisticated at arguing what's going on inside the house. No vacant lot. The fact that they jacked up all the homes in that neighborhood isn't justified because where's the vacant lot? Where's the starting point for a comp? Am I not making myself clear? You cannot unbundle the land from the house. They try to do that in an arbitrary manner, and I'll teach you some of the expressions they're going to use, and you just have to turn a deaf ear to it. Yes, sir.
Sure. 2 questions I'm afraid to ask, but I would like an answer to these. So we're new. We moved from Indiana. We bought a house here in 2017. We had no experience.
Go Hoosiers.
Oh, thank you. Okay. And so since we bought the house, we've made 0 improvements to the structures. And our appraisal has gone up in 2 years 46%.
Welcome to Texas.
Yeah, that's what I.
This is like deer season.
Yeah.
So you're the deer.
I had my informal today, and I had quite a bit of evidence. There were improvements that they had listed that weren't done. Fireplace, we don't have fireplace. Bathroom, we didn't put another bathroom. You know, we haven't touched it, right? And so there was a list of things that it said that we've made improvements of. We also didn't receive our 2017 notice, and that's because I think they fat-fingered our names into the system, and we validated that and got that changed. So I thought several good arguments for this. Their argument was simply that, well, you paid X number of dollars for this, and that was above the current appraisal, and therefore you said that the house is worth this much. and they've added a little bit on because we didn't put a swimming pool in. And that kicked them off, I guess, coming out. But the two questions I have based on that are, A, everywhere I've lived in the past, California, Illinois, Indiana, the appraised value is not the market value. It's usually around 75% of the market value. And her comment was absolutely not, we do market value. And that, of course, opens up the cabinet of all kinds of arguments and things as you put some up. So I'm curious if that is the law here, okay, or that's...
Well, it's their definition of market value. It's not the market value. It's the tax value, which anybody in real estate will tell you that we don't look to the tax value to work against you, to negotiate against you when you go to sell. And I can tell you, living here all my life, before 2010, the values that they would usually use were less than 90%. They were not encouraging, they were encouraging compliance by not poking the bear.
Right.
We're a room full of bears. So since that time, when in 2010, we had our values adjusted thanks to the recession that affected the entire country, I've seen this noticeably go up, and that's why we're setting records. And I appreciate that you joined in the momentum. The argument that you paid something for it, did you ever make a mistake in your life?
Oh, absolutely.
Well, then there's another one.
Yeah.
Okay? And I'm not suggesting you did,
Yeah.
but
financial institutions have done appraisals, right, so that you can get...
and financial institutions make mistakes.
Sure.
They judge you on your credit, your income, as well as the value. So you had 2 C's and you got an F.
Right.
Okay? I'm joking.
No,
That's the way I'd come right back at them. So I'm sorry.
One of the arguments that I tried to raise, and I found this interesting, is that, if the house was underappraised grossly, which it evidently was, they're not doing their job. So, we planned all the financials around the current appraisal of the house, right? Not understanding that they could up at 46% in 2 years. So that's the type of argument I'm trying to make in front of the board. I don't know if that holds any water, basically. So that's...
Take my card, send me the specifics, and let's see if we can dig into some arguments.
Sure.
Okay, because...
I've been taking diligent notes. There's some good stuff in there. So.
Well, I hope so. And again, you may get a better success at the formal.
Yeah.
Okay? I'm gonna give you...
And by the way, I just thought, I don't want to take over, but today she offered to lower it about 10%. Like, let's make a deal.
No, I
Right?
said...
And this is just the normal way of, you make all these mistakes. Yeah, I'll tell you what, I'll make it this amount if you'll go away, basically.
Yeah, well, this isn't Monty Hall, let's make a deal. I want to get through, because I'm being given the high sign that we got to make sure, because we're going to have another group come in after you, and so we don't want to get caught with firefighters saying that we've overstocked the hall. But let me tell you 3 real case studies that might get you a little fired up. I represented the firemen whose value went up from $1 million to $1.5 million from 1 year to the next. That's the firefighters' hall. That's the firefighters' hall at I-10. Okay? And so I went in there and I said, look at this picture and that picture. They had pictures of the roof, knowing that they had put on new roofs. But I had pictures of the deficiencies inside. I, as a commercial real estate broker, thought the value of the property was 1.8 to 2 million. That's why I offered to help them. I want to sell your property. But if you ask me to help you tell them it's lower, then I'm going to show you all the pictures I can. They said, and I went in, I met someone like yourself, we're both wearing golf shirts, and we said, oh, where do you play, where do you play? They offered me 1.3. I walked out of the informal hearing, I said, let me call the treasurer. The treasurer says, I said, listen, if I go to a formal hearing, it's going to go on record. What do you want me to do? He says, hey, listen, now that you've explained how this works, take the 1.3. I went back in there. I said, I'll take the 1.3 based on what my client's given me authority to do, but could you throw me a bone? Make them look like I did something, right? And they lowered it to 1.25. I mean, my guy is guilty as charged. In my heart of hearts, I want to sell their property for $2 million if they'll give me the listing. So that $50,000 came because I just said, can you throw me a bone? Literally, I was laughing. I mean, but then I was crying because $50,000 to any one of us would be a lot of money, a lot of value. Curry and Bean bought a building. Now, I'm not making this stuff up. It's an Indian who met a Mexican, and they decided they named their company Curry and Bean. So we don't discriminate against ethnicity. Both of them together bought a building for $900,000. The Bear Appraisal District, before they had, when they bought it, was $820,000. Before, when they went in, they gutted it, they hadn't even finished getting a certificate of occupancy, it was jacked up to $1.6 million. They haven't even used it yet. It's in worse condition when they bought it. So we've got a $50,000 arbitrary adjustment, we've got ethnic groups that are just as equally discriminated against, and we had a gentleman who built his home for $250,000 with his father, well, so he probably got a good break, but the lender appraised it for $350,000, and Bear Appraisal came in at $460,000. We filed for arbitration, and before we got to having to go to arbitration, they lowered it to a number he was satisfied with, and he got his check back. So, the four-way test of all Rotarians, we say, yeah, all the things you think, say, and do, is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill? Will it be beneficial? I've never met a Rotarian that works at the Bear Appraisal District. No, I'm just kidding. But I can just tell you that that's the culture. Because these are some of the misleading statements that you may have heard. Land value is always, fill in the blank. Land value is always nothing. We don't know what land value is unless you sell the land. State law requires us to fill in the blank. They're not lawyers, and they probably don't know the state law. Informal hearings generally are the best. So there's no need to form, right? Let's make a deal. Why? Because you don't want to go in front of a panel that might be sympathetic? See, they're making, well, I'll tell you what I will say, and I'll show you later, is I would say to Mr. Appraiser, well, let me think about it, let me talk to my spouse, I'm just not sure, maybe I need to hire somebody, but is there anything I could bring you before the formal hearing that maybe we could adjust this? If they say, no, then they're being deceitful. Because I've literally walked out with them telling me, if you could just bring me a few more estimates, if you just bring me a few more pictures. They just want to stuff the file, close the file, and so think about that before you just roll into the formal hearing. Maybe we call them back and we give them some more evidence. And what was the last one? Oh, fair market value, it's not equal to property tax assessed value. So step by step, you already passed the protest deadline for most of us. You've already requested your evidence package, or you still can. You've attended an informal hearing, and that gentleman needs to follow up to the informal if he left the door open. For those of you that haven't gone, leave the door open. Invite them to invite you to get this resolved. By what? What's your out? I got to check with my spouse. What's their out? They don't want to go to the formal hearing. They don't want to be embarrassed in front of a panel, and they want to close files. And then consider binding arbitration or filing a lawsuit. This is a case where Mr. Garcia, with a master's in economics, owns a division laundry, hospitality, hotel, linen, dry cleaning company on the off Highway 90. He went in and they had proposed $3.6 million. I told him, how about 1.2? Because I said, show me a like manufacturing facility that is taxed at this value. Don't show me another warehouse, don't show me office warehouses, show me another one. You know, the one we found was the one cooperatively owned by the Bear County Hospital District, the same group you pay taxes to. That place was on their website at twice the square footage than the square footage that was on the taxing authority. We were paying taxes to an entity that they own that was twice the square footage. So I pointed it out. I also showed him a rap sheet. This is the property off of Highway 90. And Mr. Garcia, having taken a picture with Mr. Amosquito, where you can see he's not smiling, we're smiling right after the formal hearing. The following week, we filed a lawsuit. Right? We got friendly. And when they came back, they offered him $1.6 million because he filed a lawsuit. But Mr. Garcia, he's OCD. He ought to be a CPA. He said, I'm going to want to meet with the appraiser, and I want to make sure they got all the facts right. I said, Mr. Garcia, do what you want. I'm sitting there, looking at my Facebook while they're talking, and he brings a lawyer, and they go over it, and the appraiser says, well, okay, I'll make that adjustment, I'll make this adjustment, make that adjustment, all these facts. Value I'm coming up with as far as $2.3 million. We said, what do you mean? The negotiator offered us 1.6. The appraiser says, well, he's an idiot. I mean, I'm watching this banter. I said, well, I like the idiot. We're going to go back and take the idiot's offer. So the negotiator gave us 1.6. That's the good news. He saved $50,000. The bad news is this year, the following year, within a month, they gave the value, they raised the value back to 2.6. So if with the help of attorneys, help of myself, we get a $2 million savings, or times 2.7, or about $54,000 savings, game on. We're going to be right back at it. So, binding arbitration. To qualify for binding arbitration, you must make a request for binding arbitration together with the required deposit within 45 days. So, you got 45 days to make that call before you consider filing a lawsuit. That value, the cost of it is $450 if your home is less than $500,000, or $500,000 if it's more than $500,000. But what you don't know, what isn't easily explained, is that the arbitrator's fee is everything less than other than $50. Now this is like a tug of war. If you think your home's worth $300,000 and they think it's worth $350,000, if you can get them to $324,000, you won. Now you may not have won because you wanted it $300,000, but you won because then they pay the arbitrator's fee. So you gambled for $50,000, but you might get $400,000 back if you just meet them more than halfway. Again, in tug of wars, you just want to dump them in the creek, right? You don't need to pull them across to your side. So keep that in mind. We need to explain it again. We'll be happy to, but just that's why I want you to keep your peace. My father died of a stroke. Don't get stressed. Okay, this is connecting the dots. Your property taxes are raised when they are appraised by the chief appraiser. He's hired by the board of directors. The tax collector's on the Bear Appraisal District Board of Directors. The tax assessor influences the board, but you vote for everybody else that's on the board also. Take the issue to every one of your elected officials. Mr. Amosquita, he said that he's been going to the legislative session since 1997, and that the chief appraisers don't have any more stroke at the legislature than you or I or the man on the moon. There's just so much apathy, and I've seen it continue, and I've seen it up close and personal. He even told the Bexar County Commissioners when he was young and a little more irritable about always being the bad guy, he said to the Bexar County Commissioners, why don't we sue me so we can play this out in a public venue? What you're telling me on the backside I need to do would be the bad guy. His request was denied. So here's the intergovernmental blame game. The appraisal district assesses value. The assessor collector claims, I have nothing. It's not my problem. I'm just Matthew. No, sorry, you're on that board. The county blames or fights the state for not legislating guidelines. The state blames the local authorities. The school districts blame the state. And round we go. So we're going to have to come up with a smarter tax system. Well, that's not the subject of today's conversation, but I'm just setting the stage for what we're all going to have to do together. Because there's 1,250 school districts for 250 counties, and there's only 150 state reps. And although Texas has grown by 18 million, thanks to, in part, your migration from Indiana, there's no rhyme or reason for the geographical boundaries of that many school districts or the lack of consistency for authority. So we're going to have to achieve financial efficiency, we're going to have to solve the problem of wealth discrimination, and we're going to have to reduce the current statewide excess administration. Currently, they're about to change this, your tax value can go up 10%. Be on guard. Even if they got in at 9.9 and you said, oh, well, they only maxed it out at 10. Well, the rule of 72 that Patrick and Michael will teach if they were your financial planners is that anything that goes up 10% every year doubles in 7.2 years. So be wary that if you're not protesting the values and you're not keeping your eye on it, in 7 years you could have twice the burden you currently have. So I'd like to thank the Family Association. I'd like to thank Patrick. I have to thank the St. Mark's Knights of Columbus, these think tanks that have given us some of this information. But I've got a few other points to make before I let you go. And that is that the history is that we have practiced wealth discrimination in Bexar County all the way to the Supreme Court. We're not doing anything about it. I do believe education is essential to participation in the political process. Hopefully we've given you some education. And then I think this is the foundation of performing citizenship. But we deserve better because we're supposed to, in Texas, fund public education efficiently for the general diffusion of knowledge. So when we go to the stores, the person on the other side can communicate with us and make change. The person standing next to us with their constitutional carry pistol on their side maybe knows how to use it. So we want everybody to be better educated. We just don't want to do it inefficiently. So, we need a smarter tax, and we're going to have to work together to restore the American dream, and perhaps remember thanks to the San Antonio Family Association who put this on for y'all, the homeownership should be a concern to all families. They didn't come up with these words. We found this in a think tank's representation, or excuse me, report to the state legislature. They said it was fundamental to the family that homeowners are community-minded and homeowners are more likely to be married and have children. Property rights are diluted when property taxes are perpetual. That's what they currently are, and that property ownership is reduced basically, some of us, to a form of renting from the government. Yes, sir.
Just a quick question, on the evidence package you
Yes.
said to request?
Yes.
When did they send that to you?
It was, as soon as you request it, you can go down there, they might just print it for you. If you've already
They
filed.
won't mail it to you?
Yeah, they'll mail it to you.
When?
Oh,
No,
within,
when you filed your protest,
Yeah,
you
within-
check a box. that
yeah,
says
when you
that-
filed your protest, you can check the box.
I did.
Well, then you should be getting it before you get
It's
before you get the schedule.
I already got my schedule, I didn't get no evidence.
Well, then you need to tell them that you didn't get
All
it.
right,
Okay.
thank you.
Mike,
Yes, sir.
over here.
Can't see, go ahead.
Two quick questions. When you said the property tax should only go up no more than 10%, is that,
The property tax value, currently, that's the value that they can raise it to for tax purposes. They'll raise the value as much as they can, because it sets them up for the argument the following year. Does
okay,
that make sense? So some of your property values went up 20, 25%, like the case study we showed,
fine?
but, so if they lower it to only 10%, they haven't saved you anything on your tax bill.
So is that percentage both the property and the home?
Yeah, it's the overall.
Overall, okay. Second question.
Yes, ma'am.
Should we protest every year?
Ideally, I would, just as a patriotic citizen, but yes, you should protest, because that's the only way you're gonna be able to get tax relief currently. Because nobody has any better ideas so far in the legislature.
So is it 10% the amount that you pay, basically? That's the max that they can do it?
Not they
Raise it
break
yearly?
So they can, on your homestead, they can raise the value 10% for tax purposes. They can raise the value more than that for conversation purposes, and that's where it lies the rub. Some of you have had your values go up 25%, and you went back in there and you argued it down to 12%, but you didn't get any tax relief from one year to the next. The legislature is currently considering possibilities of controlling big governments or local governments to not raising your value more than 3.5% for tax purposes. But that's another conversation. I want to tell you about the generational ignorance that we all have to help overcome. And then we'll close this out. From the age of 6 to 18, I've talked to a career day 4th graders. And I asked them, what do you know about income taxes? And they didn't know anything. What do you know about sales tax? And this child raised his arm. I thought, oh my goodness, what does he know about sales tax? He said, my dad says for every dollar I spend of my allowance, I've got to have a dime for the taxes. So even 4th graders understand property taxes. Or excuse me, sales tax. Sales tax. From 18 to 35, this is what I usually hear. I don't pay property taxes, I rent, right? Wrong. Because they're paying it for the landlord who doesn't have the obligation under the law to disclose why the rent's going up, because their taxes are going up. Except they generally hire lawyers and settle 50% of the cases before they go to court. From 35 to 65, most of us are paying through lender-required escrows, even though we're misdirected from telling the lender that, hey, keep us aware because we need to have the authority to direct the protests. But from 65 to beyond, as I'm approaching that date, I mean, half of our taxes are for schools your children don't attend, or you don't get to use the schools for recreation.
So how do you let them know?
How do you let who
They
know?
don't care. No, I mean, how do you put that on?
How do we put what on?
How do you tell Barrett County that?
They don't, what I'm saying is the overall mindset is that we are gonna come together.
No, I think they freeze it.
The homestead exemptions, the 65-year-old exemptions, you need to follow those exemptions. You need to make sure that your exemptions are on record.
Okay.
So you have to communicate with the Borough Appraisal District and make sure that you have all the applicable exemptions.
Okay.
But what I'm emphasizing is that we have to work together, because otherwise half your taxes are going to the schools. And I'm all for educating kids. I just think it's an inefficient way and it's a burdensome way to those of us who don't have any children. Yes, sir.
Michael, is it worth somebody over 65 filing a protest?
It is because I think that you want to consider the possibility you may go to rent that home. If you move out of it, you may want to pass it on to your heirs before you even pass on. And I would also say that you're doing the neighborly thing. Because otherwise the neighbor across the street said, well, look, Sheila, their value went up. So even if you feel like you're insulated from some of the tax increases, which are different from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, please don't be blind to the opportunity to do the neighborly thing. And that's protest your value, keep it under control. When you're ready to go to market, you find a great realtor, you spruce it up, and let's go get the best value. So I think we have probably exhausted our time. Patrick, how are we doing?
Any more questions?
I just
Yes,
have,
sir.
We were talking about about the land. Some of the houses around me, they base them on a base lot, and mine's a residential lot. They're just single houses on them, but their price per square foot, about $1.50 square foot, and mine's $5 a square foot on the land.
They're just making this stuff up as they go along.
But
But
it's listed under the description of a base rate lot. They're all older houses. They've been there a long time, but I don't know what that means, a base rate.
I don't know that. That's a good question for me, but send it to me specifically. I'd be happy to guide you through it. Again, I'm not looking to get hired. I'm just looking to be more educated myself, and something you and I work through together, maybe we can help others. I've never heard of this base rate, like I told you. There's a lot of misleading comments and mindsets, but you might talk to that lady, Ann Engler, who's at the Bowen Center. She knows the BCAT website probably better than you, and you know it better than me because I've already seen you. So go visit with her, see if she can give you some insight, and then circle back. There was another question?
yes, I always wondered, I haven't done all that for years, but is it better to go to the informal and then the formal? Or is it better to skip the informal and go to the formal, or vice versa?
No, you can't go vice versa. You either go to the informal, which I would strongly recommend, and you, as I said, it's one-on-one, it's not on the record, and it's an opportunity to invite that person to explain their logic. It's an opportunity for you. I've actually been called at the last second by some people and said, hey, can you go down there? I've gone down there, said, listen, I'm here on behalf of my friend, and I don't have the evidence, and I don't know if I look likable or something. And they go, well, let me see. And they look it up, and they go, well, what were you looking for? I said, I don't know. He's my friend. He's working. And next thing you know, they're making me an offer. So they made me an offer. So then you offer them the opportunity to get this settled before the formal. You keep the conversation going. You don't end it because you left. You say, if I can bring you some evidence, maybe we can get this settled. They don't want to go to, quote, the hearing, like they don't want to go to court any more than you do.
Do they only allow a certain amount in the informal?
Yes, that's correct. She's making a good point. Some of the informal appraisals will tell you, I can only do this, so you need to go to formal because they're outside their capacity. That's correct. But it seems to vary, client to client or taxpayer to taxpayer. But yes, sometimes you have to go to formal, even when the informal appraiser is giving you the best that they can give you. That they can give you, not the best that it can be adjusted to. That's what you're referring to, and I agree. But don't miss the opportunity to go to informal and get them to put on the evidence that they're going to put on in front of the formal panel. Don't miss the opportunity to gain a friend before you go into the fight. That's my advice. That's why I don't encourage online protests. Now, I realize that some of you have to do that online, but I, for one, don't want to miss the opportunity to connect. Does that help?
So that was my mistake, I did online then.
Well, it's not a mistake, it's just that if you start online, but you can get back to doing it in person, you look very likable. I love the colors. Go meet them, okay? They might actually be sensitive. Tell them, if I was your sister, is this the way you would talk to me? Yes, sir.
Yes, I was just curious about military disability. According to the VA, I'm 93% disabled, but yet my tax keeps going up and up.
Again, send it to me, because I got to get more educated about military disability and where maybe the abuse is. But thank you for your service, and let's make sure that you are being properly tagged and exempted. Yes, sir.
You said go ahead and give a recommendation for what you think your property's worth.
No, don't. I said don't. The first rule of negotiation is don't make the first offer. So do not. They're gonna ask you, well, what are you looking
Do you
for?
ever do that in the process?
Well, yeah, I did it when I went from 3.6 to 1.2 million.
Shoot for it.
What's that?
Last year's?
No.
Or-
No,
How
but
do you recommend?
with God, all things are possible, according to Matthew the tax collector. It's not probable, but I'm gonna start by something low when I'm just negotiating informally.
But that's a question on the floor.
You don't have to answer that question. The words of Mike Amasquita, the words of Mike Amasquita, don't help me do my job. No, I don't know. You're the expert, Mr. Appraiser. What are you gonna get, I don't know. Yes, ma'am.
So, does that mean it's a less favorable strategy to submit market information with your proposal?
Unless it's meeting the number that you're trying to get to. But I don't submit anything. I want to know their case, and then I want to be prepared to argue against that.
So don't give me information until it gets an informal? Is that what
Till you get the evidence package from them. Right now, even if you didn't get it, even if you didn't check the block, you're entitled to get the evidence package.
Is that applied to Comell County?
That applies to every county.
You can ask.
Yeah, except Comell didn't have a little block in the bottom right-hand corner. I've done this in New Braunfels. I've seen the form. Yes, ma'am. They're on the here, I'll just give you, but there's a box back there.
Say for Mike Braun.
Thank you.
Okay, I hope y'all learned that we had a takeaway. Before you leave, please make sure you sign the sheet and sign up, because we're going to send the presentation out to everybody who signed up and do that. So thank you very much for coming, and I hope you had some takeaways. My greatest takeaway was pull a Columbo before you walk out of the informal hearing and leave and solidify a deal. You say, can I bring you anything else? Is there anything else information-wise that can help me? So pull a Columbo and make sure you do that. So on behalf of the San Antonio Family Association, I want to introduce Mike Kanucky in the back in the suit, who's the president of the San Antonio Family Association. I want to thank St. Mark's Knights Columbus, Gary, and Zapping. If y'all raise your hand back there. If you need information about renting this hall, about renting the Christopher Hall, you can talk to Gary and Zapping back in the back. I want to introduce real quick a great ally of the San Antonio Family Association is Richard Reyna of Guadalupe Radio Network, Catholic Radio, 89.7 FM. If you want to talk to him about 89.7 FM. And the Christian Chamber of Commerce. So we're going to close with a prayer. If you're still there, as you're wrapping up, there's a prayer at the bottom of your page there. We'll pray for our country. If you will, let's pray for our country. We need, this is election season. There's a runoff. There's an election going on right now in San Antonio, and we need to get out and vote. Make sure you get out and vote and exercise your right and duty. May 28th, early voting starts. And Election Day, I think, is Saturday, June 2nd. I want to say it's the first Saturday. You got to get out and vote. There's a mayoral runoff. There's District 4, District 6, and a runoff. So get out and exercise your vote. And pray for our country. God our Father, giver of life, we entrust the United States of America, the state of Texas, Barrett County, and the city of St. Anthony to your loving care. You are the rock on which this nation was founded. You alone are the true source of our cherished rights to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. Reclaim this land for your glory and dwell among your people. Send your spirit to touch the hearts of our nation's leaders with an intense desire to fulfill their responsibilities that protects individuals, marriages, families, and long-term domestic prosperity. Open our public officials' minds and all people who live in America to the inestimable worth of human life, to the responsibilities that accompany human freedom. Remind your people that true happiness is rooted in seeking and doing your will. Through the intercession of your Holy Spirit, grant us the courage to reject the culture of death, indifference, communism and socialism, totalitarianism and egalitarianism, and bless us with a desire, strength, and fortitude to be courageous conduits to help bring about a new culture of life, marriage, family, and freedom. We ask for your divine assistance to help us be and remain faithful to you, and for our collective petitions through your Son, Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. Amen. Thank you all for coming. Have a great evening.